thermonuclear warhead.
It's generations ahead of where these people should be technically. How did they manage that?
Maybe they had help.
There's an episode of Star Trek that was buried, hidden away from millions of fans for decades. Not because it was poorly written, not because it failed to entertain, but because its message was wrapped in a symbol so powerful, so controversial, it triggered a nation's deepest scars. In a franchise known for boldly going where no one has gone before, this particular episode went too far. Banned outright in Germany and quietly avoided elsewhere, it was treated like a stain on the legacy of the show. But what was so dangerous about it? And why did it take so long for it to resurface? Join us as we uncover the dark story behind the Star Trek episode They Didn't Want You to See, and why its message still matters now more than ever. The episode in question, Pattern of Force. When fans discuss the most daring moments in Star Trek history, they frequently highlight memorable scenes such as Captain Kirk's kiss with Lieutenant Uhura or Spock's philosophical debates with Bones. However, one of the most striking and visually shocking episodes in the franchise, Patterns of Force, is rarely mentioned. Originally broadcast in 1968 as the 21st episode of Star Trek, the original series' second season, Patterns of Force stood out from anything else on television at that time. At first glance, the plot resembled a typical Trek adventure. The Enterprise crew arrives on a planet that has strayed from the Federation's principles, prompting Kirk and Spock to investigate, intervene, and restore moral order. Yet, the uniqueness of this episode lay not only in its portrayal, but also in its visuals. Viewers were met with an astonishing sight, which was a complete recreation of Nazi Germany. The uniforms, the flags, the salutes, the rhetoric, the propaganda. It was not merely metaphoric, it was starkly literal. A planetary government on Echoes, led by a rogue Earth historian named John Gill, had embraced National Socialism in its most unadulterated form. Their soldiers donned swastikas, their television broadcasts echoed Hitler-era speeches, their ruthless tactics mirrored real-world fascism. In the fictional universe, the rationale was unsettling. Gill, who was once a well-regarded cultural observer for the Federation, concluded that the efficiency of Nazi Germany's societal structure, excluding the genocide, as he believed could provide stability to a divided planet. He implemented this system on Echoes with the aim of preserving peace. However, the outcome was disastrous. Corruption took hold of his mentees. The ideological machinery dominated, and once again, the atrocities of Nazism emerged, even in a made-up alien setting. When Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock infiltrate the regime under the guise of soldiers, viewers are confronted with a shocking image. Two of the most cherished figures in science fiction, clad entirely in SS-style uniforms, maneuvering through a landscape steeped in totalitarianism. The mere sight was enough to unsettle audiences even in America, where the show initially aired without censorship. Yet, it was in Europe, especially in Germany, where the response escalated to a much graver level. In post-war Germany, the public exhibition of Nazi symbols was and continues to be regulated by stringent laws. The nation made a deliberate, legal effort to avert the glorification or trivialization of its most horrific era. Swastikas, Sieg Heil salutes, SS uniforms, these were not merely offensive. They were prohibited in public broadcasts, irrespective of the context. Therefore, when Patterns of Force was proposed for airing, it faced outright rejection. German networks barred it from television for decades. From 1968 until the mid-1990s, the episode was absent from German airwaves, and it wasn't merely banned in silence. For an extended period, even Star Trek box sets and publication packages in Germany completely omitted it. It was the absent element of the series, ignored, overlooked, intentionally erased from the experience of German viewers. Audiences would transition from episode 20 to episode 22 without any explanation regarding what transpired in between. What's even more remarkable is that Gene Roddenberry, the mind behind Star Trek, did not aim to shock merely for the sake of shock. In reality, Patterns of Force was designed as a cautionary tale, a deliberately unsettling critique of how fascism can be disguised as order and progress. It was not a promotion. It was a denunciation. Yet, despite its noble intentions, the execution proved too provocative for some viewers to accept. This led to a difficulty that would resonate throughout Star Trek's legacy for years. What occurs when a series founded on the principles of free thought, moral complexity, and political metaphors collides with the harsh realities of real-world trauma? Can fiction overstep its bounds? And should creators bear the responsibility for the emotional burden their films carry, particularly in nations where those films touch on recent wounds? In the case of Patterns of Force, the initial response was a resounding no. It seemed safer to avoid showing it altogether. This absence lent the episode an almost legendary quality. Among fans, stories of the Nazi episode spread like rumors. Some speculated it was banned for being too honest, while others believed the Federation had approved it, further enhancing its appeal. The reality behind its absence was both straightforward and deeply significant. History is painful, and the visuals from this episode brought that discomfort uncomfortably close. Nevertheless, the episode was real. For those fortunate enough to view it, whether through imported VHS tapes, bootlegs, or subsequent digital releases, it served as a potent reminder of Star Trek's willingness to tackle challenging questions, even at the risk of censorship. To understand why Patterns of Force was banned, you have to look beyond Star Trek and into the history of an entire nation trying to heal from unspeakable wounds. Why was it banned? In the late 1960s, Germany was still grappling with the profound impact of World War II. With barely 20 years since the collapse of the Third Reich, the nation faced the unsettling task of rebuilding itself, not only in terms of infrastructure, but also on emotional and moral levels. The Holocaust was not a mere chapter in history. It was a vivid, painful memory that resonated deeply within families, communities, and institutions. In this delicate atmosphere, any effort to depict Nazi ideology, even in fictional stories, was subjected to intense scrutiny. Germany had reached a consensus. Nazi symbols were not merely offensive, they posed a significant threat. Following the war, the German government implemented stringent criminal laws aimed at curbing the rise of far-right extremism. According to Section 86AA of the German Criminal Code, it became illegal to display Nazi symbols such as the swastika, SS insignia, or the Hitler salute, regardless of whether they were used in artistic or fictional contexts. These symbols, even when employed in satire or critical commentary, were prohibited from public broadcasting unless presented within a strictly regulated educational or historical framework. Thus, when the episode Patterns of Force from Star Trek came under the scrutiny of German censors, the verdict was both swift and definitive. The issue at hand was not the underlying message of the story, nor was it about its intention to denounce fascism. Rather, it was the visual representation of officers clad in SS-style uniforms, walls adorned with swastikas, and rallies that hauntingly mirrored Hitler's speeches that crossed a significant legal and cultural boundary. There was no room for interpretation. The imagery itself was sufficient to warrant an outright ban. However, Germany was not the sole location where Patterns of Force caused discomfort among networks. While it wasn't officially prohibited in other regions, numerous countries either postponed its airing or modified significant scenes. Broadcasters in the UK and certain Scandinavian areas expressed reluctance, fearing potential public backlash. In publication deals distributed to television networks globally, the episode was frequently excluded entirely, not due to it being lost or forgotten, but because distributors were worried about sparking controversy. This situation prompts a complex inquiry. Was the decision to ban the episode a demonstration of responsible sensitivity, or did it represent a type of cultural censorship? Opponents of the ban contended that Patterns of Force was precisely the story that needed to be shared. After all, the entire episode functioned as a moral lesson, a fictional warning regarding the seductive nature of authoritarianism. John Gill's misguided effort to replicate Nazi Germany was not depicted as noble. Instead, it was portrayed as a cautionary storyline, a tragedy driven by intellectual hubris and moral blindness. In fact, the episode served as a denunciation of everything that Nazi ideology represented. However, for German officials, the medium's impact was irrelevant if the message was distressing. Their worry wasn't that viewers would embrace fascism due to Star Trek. Rather, it was the potential for its imagery, even in a fictional context, to be triggering, painful, or even re-traumatizing. They had historical context to consider. In the years following the war, far-right groups had utilized the media to subtly reintroduce fascist ideologies. The swastika transcended its role as a mere historical emblem. It remained a potent political tool. Thus, permitting it to reappear on German television screens, even within a science fiction plot, was deemed too dangerous. Additionally, there was the issue of tone. In contrast to documentaries or historical dramas that portrayed the Nazi regime with gravity and authenticity, Patterns of Force was still part of a prime-time entertainment program. Its sets were theatrical, and its characters were relatable, even comical. Some critics argued that featuring Nazi symbols in such a context risked diminishing their significance, even if unintentionally. The sight of Spock and Kirk in SS-style uniforms might have been conflicting, but did it also carry an element of playfulness? The fusion of sci-fi fantasy with real-world atrocities struck many as troubling. For American viewers, these worries might have felt remote. Star Trek received widespread acclaim in the US for addressing complex moral problems. The series was recognized for using alien worlds to explore issues such as racism, war, civil rights, and political corruption. To American writers, Patterns of Force represented yet another audacious episode in a series that urged audiences to face the darker aspects of history. However, this viewpoint did not resonate universally. What was perceived as courageous in one nation could be interpreted as callous in another. It is also important to highlight that the prohibition of the episode Patterns of Force did not trigger widespread outrage. In contrast to today's controversies, where censorship ignites immediate online discussions, this particular episode faded into obscurity. German viewers who tuned into Star Trek during the 70s, 80s, and early 90s were unaware of any missing content. The series transitioned from episode 20 to 22 without any clarification. For many years, this silence kept audiences from grappling with one of the franchise's most overt political messages. Ironically, the lack of availability may have enhanced the episode's significance. Fans who later stumbled upon the banned episode felt as though they had discovered a hidden treasure, one that posed more challenging questions than most television programs. What led a Federation historian to consider Nazism as potentially efficient? How dubious is peace if it is founded on oppression? And how swiftly can noble intentions devolve into horrific acts? Ultimately, the prohibition of Patterns of Force was not aimed at silencing Star Trek. Rather, it was about safeguarding a nation's attempt to restore its ethical direction. to show that Patterns of Force wasn't a one-time case. Star Trek has a long history that consistently challenges norms, which has led to backlash in different countries. Censorship in Star Trek Beyond Episode 1. Patterns of Force stands out as perhaps the most famous banned episode in Star Trek's history. Yet it is not the sole instance where the franchise clashed with broadcasters, governments, or cultural authorities. Throughout its extensive and rich history, Star Trek has consistently challenged norms, compelling networks and societies to face issues they would prefer to sidestep. Often, these confrontations led to silence, censorship, or redaction. Consider the Next Generation episode, The High Ground. First aired in the US in 1990, this Season 3 episode initially appeared to be just another moral dilemma set on a far-off planet. The storyline revolved around a struggle between a repressive government and a militant separatist group seeking independence. Dr. Beverly Crusher is taken hostage by the rebels, prompting the Enterprise crew to grapple with the ethics of negotiation, loyalty, and terrorism. However, hidden within a single line of dialogue was a provocative statement, especially for British viewers. During a discussion with Captain Picard, Data comments on the history of terrorism, stating that the Irish unification of 2024 was also achieved by terrorist methods. That one sentence led to the episode being delayed in the United Kingdom. To grasp the reasoning behind this, it's essential to recall the political atmosphere of that era. In 1990, tensions in Northern Ireland were still intense, with the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, actively pursuing a violent campaign against British governance. Bombings, assassinations, and confrontations with law enforcement were immediate and tangible threats. For the BBC and other UK broadcasters, airing an episode that appeared to predict or endorse Irish reunification through acts of terrorism was not merely insensitive, it was potentially provocative. Consequently, Episode 12 of Star Trek, The High Ground, was not broadcast on British television until 2007, and even then, some versions omitted the contentious line. In Ireland, it also remained off the air for many years. Once again, a singular moment in Star Trek had intersected with the sensitive issues surrounding a nation's political trauma. However, the show's encounters with censorship extended beyond political matters. Star Trek has also encountered bans and edits for addressing issues related to racism, sexuality, mental health, and even gender roles. In 1968, shortly after the airing of Patterns of Force, the original series presented an episode titled Plato's Stepchildren, a largely unremarkable installment that is primarily remembered for a singular moment: the first interracial kiss on American television. Under the influence of telekinetic mind control, Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura are compelled to kiss in front of a cruel alien audience. Today, this moment is often hailed as a significant milestone. However, at the time, it was quite controversial. In various southern U.S. states, some television stations either opted not to broadcast the episode or relegated it to late-night slots to reduce its audience. NBC was flooded with protest letters, and numerous advertisers withdrew their support for the airing. The studio even created an alternative version of the scene, where the kiss was suggested but not depicted as a precaution. Additionally, there's the episode Whom Gods Destroy from Season 3 of the original series, which takes place in a Federation mental institution. The main antagonist, Garth of Iser, is a former Starfleet captain who has descended into madness and seized control of the asylum. His unpredictable actions, energetic violence, and derision of mental illness rendered the episode highly contentious in several nations. In the UK, the episode was removed from the original broadcast lineup due to its portrayal of mental illness as both dangerous and unpredictable. Several Canadian stations also opted not to air it, referring to its content as disturbing. Mental health advocacy organizations condemned the episode for reinforcing harmful stereotypes, depicting psychiatric patients as violent and beyond help. It took several years for this episode to reappear in publication in certain markets, often accompanied by disclaimers. Another point of contention arose from Star Trek, Enterprise, the prequel series that was broadcast in the early 2000s. In its third season, during the Shindy War storyline, the series introduced more somber themes such as torture, biological warfare, and revenge. A specific episode titled Chosen Realm showcased a group of religious extremists who seize control of the Enterprise and carry out acts of terror under the guise of faith. Following the events of 9/11, this episode resonated uncomfortably with real-life occurrences. Although it was aired in the US, broadcasters in certain regions of the Middle East and South Asia either modified or completely removed it from their schedules, citing cultural sensitivities. Some viewers believed it unfairly associated religious commitment with fanaticism. These are merely the officially recorded instances. Throughout its worldwide influence, Star Trek has often been edited, muted, or modified in ways that rarely make the news. Scenes depicting same-sex affection, political commentary, or even specific language have been tailored for local viewers, frequently without their awareness. What one nation deems as daring storytelling, another may view as subversive or offensive. However, perhaps the most telling aspect of Star Trek's history of censorship is how frequently it was a response rather than a preemptive measure. These episodes were not crafted to incite bans. They were designed to provoke thought, to investigate the outcomes when ideals clash with reality. While some cultures embraced that clash, others were not prepared for it. What stands out is that despite all the cuts, prohibitions, and modifications, the fundamental message of Star Trek has remained intact: that the pursuit of truth, no matter how unsettling, is invaluable. That conversation is essential, even when it causes offense. And that fiction, particularly science fiction, should never avoid mirroring the real world, even when that reflection is harsh. For countless fans, this readiness to face difficult truths is precisely why Star Trek continues to thrive. It does more than entertain. It educates. It provokes. It encourages viewers to scrutinize their own prejudices, their own past, and their own culture. Indeed, Star Trek has faced censorship. Yes, it has been prohibited. Yet, each occurrence reinforces the same message. The concepts within it are formidable. Sometimes, too formidable for everyone to digest all at the same time. And that may very well be the franchise's most revolutionary accomplishment of all. Star Trek was not just designed to conform to television standards, it was created to challenge them. How Star Trek was designed to challenge the norm. From its inception, the series transcended mere science fiction. It was, in essence, social fiction. Gene Roddenberry, who transitioned from a police officer to a screenwriter, had no desire to craft sanitized, futuristic fairy tales. Instead, he aimed to use the far-off future as a reflection of the chaotic present. During an era when American television was dominated by safe domestic sitcoms and rigid stereotypes, Roddenberry boldly envisioned a future devoid of racism, poverty, or war. More significantly, he envisioned a future where humanity achieved peace by confronting its deepest flaws. This vision, idealistic yet grounded, became the essence of Star Trek's identity. When Roddenberry presented the original series in the 1960s, he referred to it as a wagon train to the stars to make it more appealing to apprehensive network executives. However, beneath that facade lay a Trojan horse brimming with moral intricacies, political metaphor, and incisive social commentary. Roddenberry's enterprise was not merely traversing space, it was navigating through metaphors: racism, authoritarianism, class struggle, gender equality, nuclear peril, and civil unrest. He aimed to provoke thought among viewers, even if it meant making them feel uneasy in the process. Roddenberry was adamant that Star Trek should mirror the diversity of the world. In 1966, this involved featuring a Japanese-American helmsman, a black female communications officer, and a Russian flag on the bridge of a prominent network show, right in the midst of Cold War anxieties and civil rights struggles. It signified granting them equal status, dialogue, and intellect, without reducing them to mere tokens. For numerous viewers, particularly those from minority backgrounds, this was the first instance they witnessed their own representation in roles of respect and authority on television. Nichelle Nichols, who portrayed Lieutenant Uhura, once contemplated leaving the series. However, a fortuitous meeting with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. altered her decision. As Nichols later recounted, King expressed that Star Trek was the only show he permitted his children to stay up and watch, emphasizing that she was embodying a role of significant cultural importance. To him, and to many others, Uhura transcended being just a character. She represented a vision of a hopeful future. Roddenberry also vigorously advocated for episodes that confronted challenging issues. One of the earliest, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, employed aliens with black and white faces to comment on racial division. Another episode, A Private Little War, subtly criticized American involvement in Vietnam. A Taste of Armageddon raised ethical questions about the sanitization of war through technology. These storylines were anything but safe. They mirrored real-world headlines, cleverly disguised in alien attire and strange star systems, but fundamentally human at their essence. Behind the scenes, writers and producers frequently resisted studio demands to tone things down. In interviews, many recounted how Roddenberry was unwavering in his defense of controversial scripts. D.C. Fontana, a leading writer for the show and one of the first notable women in science fiction television, remarked that Roddenberry was dedicated to the notion that we were sharing stories that mattered. She remembered him entering network meetings fully aware of the potential for pushback, but he was never inclined to dilute the show's values merely to appease sponsors. This dedication proved beneficial, not always in terms of ratings, but in terms of legacy. Although the original series ran for just 3 seasons, it emerged as a cultural phenomenon like no other. Over the years, critics began to view Star Trek not merely as genre entertainment, but as insightful commentary. The New York Times, Time, and The Atlantic later published essays praising the show's progressive essence. Scholars authored papers analyzing its philosophical foundations. NASA even acknowledged that Star Trek inspired real-world technological advancements and heightened public interest in space exploration. When The Next Generation premiered in 1987, it upheld this tradition of defying conventions. Episodes such as Measure of a Man explored themes of personhood and artificial intelligence long before they entered mainstream discourse. The Outcast addressed issues of gender identity and societal erasure. Darmok, while subtle, offered a profound examination of communication barriers and empathy across different cultures. Actors and creators from subsequent series frequently referenced Roddenberry's original principles as their inspiration. Patrick Stewart, who portrayed Captain Jean-Luc Picard, mentioned in interviews that the scripts of the show dared to pose questions that other series wouldn't approach. Kate Mulgrew, the first female captain to control a Star Trek series, expressed that embodying Janeway in Voyager enabled her to assume a leadership position that had previously been deemed unattainable for women on television. Even Deep Space Nine, often regarded as the most intense and morally complex Trek series, adhered to Roddenberry's vision of challenging ideologies. It tackled issues like religious extremism, occupation, terrorism, and post-war trauma in ways that few shows dared to explore at the time. Star Trek wasn't merely depicting the future, it was leveraging the future to question the present. Naturally, the show's audacity attracted criticism. Some claimed that its idealism was impractical. Others believed that its metaphors were overly explicit. Yet, whether praised or criticized, one aspect remained clear. Star Trek encouraged critical thinking. It wasn't hesitant to navigate cultural sensitivities, even at the risk of alienating segments of its viewership. This encapsulates the essence of Roddenberry's legacy. He sought a show that did more than entertain. He envisioned one that provoked thought, subtly, intelligently, and at times, explosively. He crafted a franchise capable of sustaining that mission across decades, amidst political changes, cultural upheavals, and technological advancements. In the contemporary landscape, where much of the media is designed to entertain, divert, or follow trends, Star Trek stands out as a bold exception. It originated from a vision, not one of escapism, but of active participation. Not one of ease, but of challenge. A series that urged its audience to view themselves not merely as bystanders in history, but as caretakers of it. This is what renders Star Trek groundbreaking. This is why, even in times when episodes faced bans, censorship, or misinterpretation, the essence of the show remained steadfast. Time has a peculiar ability to reshape controversy. What was once shocking and unsettling can, over the years, transform into a topic of intrigue, reassessment, and even admiration. Modern rediscovery of pattern of force. This is precisely the case with Patterns of Force. Initially deemed too provocative to be aired in Germany and discreetly excluded from various international markets, the episode has since experienced a revival, not through censorship, but through thoughtful reflection. In 1995, almost 30 years after its original airing, Patterns of Force finally made its debut on German television. However, it wasn't simply inserted into the programming schedule. Instead, it was featured as part of a late-night special, introduced with contextual commentary and followed by a discussion. This broadcast transcended mere entertainment. It became a dialogue. This marked a significant shift. The episode had transformed from a dangerous subject to one worthy of revisiting. By the mid-2000s, both fans and scholars began to reassess Patterns of Force as one of Star Trek's most intellectually audacious episodes. On platforms like Reddit, fans engage in discussions not only about its shocking elements, but also its moral complexities. They deliberate on John Gill's tragic reasoning, the ethics of enforcing order amidst chaos, and whether Kirk's opposition to fascism holds a different significance today compared to 1968. Critics have also softened their stance. While the episode was previously condemned for its overt use of Nazi imagery, it is now frequently praised for its bold portrayal. The image of a seemingly compassionate historian reviving a fascist regime was well ahead of its time. In a period where authoritarianism is resurging globally, Gill's justification, efficiency over morality, resonates with unsettling relevance. Academic interest has mirrored this trend. The episode is often referenced in research concerning post-war memory, media ethics, and the influence of science fiction on historical metaphor. Some academics contend that Patterns of Force focused less on Nazism itself and more on the danger of whitewashing history. By featuring a respected Federation observer, who attempts to reframe fascism as a political instrument. The episode cautions that history is not merely to be recalled, it can also be dangerously reinterpreted. Contemporary Star Trek creators have subtly honored this episode. Although they have not replicated its exact imagery, Strange New Worlds, Picard, and Discovery have continued to dive into themes of authoritarianism, moral ambiguity, and ideological extremism. In many respects, Patterns of Force established the standard for how fearlessly the franchise could navigate uncomfortable subjects while maintaining its ethical integrity. Nevertheless, it has its detractors. Some modern viewers perceive the episode's method as overly forceful, with its production design teetering on the edge of exploitation. The imagery, actors donned in full Nazi regalia, swastikas displayed on alien structures, can be unsettling for younger viewers who may not grasp the show's deeper intentions. Moreover, in an era rife with misinformation, there is always the danger that such bold metaphors could be misinterpreted or taken literally by malicious individuals. However, the tension between discomfort and truth is exactly what lends the episode its enduring impact. It was never intended to be easy to watch. Its purpose was to stimulate reflection, and even after more than 50 years, yet it continues to do so. On platforms such as YouTube and various podcast channels, Patterns of Force remains a topic of conversation. Video essays analyze its underlying themes. Commenters debate whether it could even be produced in today's climate. Through this renewed interest, an intriguing reversal has taken place. The episode that was once deemed unshowable is now widely available, examined, and by many held in high regard. Above all, Patterns of Force is now recognized as a product of its era that boldly addressed issues ahead of its time. It didn't merely use history for dramatic effect. It scrutinized it. It served as a reminder to viewers that ideology is delicate, power can corrupt swiftly, and the shadows of the past are never as distant as we might believe. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.